G'day YouTube, my name's Lance and welcome to Bundy Bear's Shed. This is a clip on how I pulled this rock shaft apart. Now this is a top cover on our 1948 TE20 and we're working through the tractor and we're doing a video of how to and how we go through the whole show as we go. So hopefully it helps you out. We'll make this two parts. The first one is stripping the lift cover down, just showing you how I got it apart. Then I'll go away and clean the parts, and part two will be assembling it all back together and getting it ready to put on the tractor. So we can't actually put it on the tractor until the tractor is running. We have the engine back in and all that, but we can just set it up for the initial firing up and go from there. So hope you enjoyed. This is part one of how I got to this stage on a pallet on the front of the forklift. We've done it on the front of the forklift so I can get the camera around on different angles a little bit better. So all the parts that we're fitting into it are supplied by Sparex. We have a little Sparex sign over the back. They're great sponsors of our channel, and we sell a lot of their parts through Queensland Tractor Spares, the business I own, where we sell them. So look, hopefully you enjoy the video. You see how to get yours apart in this video, part one. Well, here we are with the TE20 hydraulic top cover, and I've got it sitting up on a pallet on the forklift just so we can get the camera around it a little bit. We've got the caravan in the background, the Jayco, don't worry too much about that. We've got the Sparex sign in the background and a couple of parts that we're going to fit to this. But for the moment, we'll just work on pulling the whole thing apart and just the process of doing that. So what I like to do is on the donkey dick, I don't know why they call it that, there's a little split pin that holds a clevis pin in. So we take that out. I'll go and get a hammer and a punch. I didn't expect that to be that tight. Right, I have the technical terms are knockometer. Usually you start off with a tapered punch and finish off with a pin punch. We put that aside, and that's the donkey dick, the push rod. It sits in a socket in the end here, and that socket's hooked to your arms through this rock shaft, and so when that goes back and forth, your arms will go up and down. So the piston in the cylinder here comes out and pushes on there and goes back and forth. So first up, we get rid of the push rod, the donkey dick, whatever you'd like to call it. Then this spring here, it holds tension against the eccentric or against the quadrant. So when we move the lever back and forth, you can see that move. Now with that spring off, you can see it's not held against the back there, and you can move the quadrant and very little happens. So that comes away. Now there's a fork in here, and that fork comes down through the bottom of the adjusting yoke here. Now I don't know if this one's free or not, but on some of these, many of them, we actually have to cut this out. It gets that rusted over time from being out in the moisture that we don't have much of a chance of getting it out any other way. So look, we'll have a go at that. We'll pull the cylinder off and we'll pop this quadrant lever off. Okay, off camera, I've undone the 4 screws or bolts that hold this on. Now you need an 11/16 spanner for that, and they have a big flat washer on them. then that should just pull out. Now, you'll notice they have slots in them. Now those slots are for adjustments later, so you can work out the traveller's adjustments to do. There's a little hole here that relies on a little bit of splash oil coming up, and your quadrant should be reasonably free to turn in there. And you can see how the pin is offset here. And that's what works, that's what rubs on the back of here that actually tells your control valve where to go. So we'll be stripping that separately and running right through that and doing it up, bead blasting it and painting it. The whole works. Right, now what I choose to do next is undo this cylinder. Now, in the video on taking the top cover off, I had a little bit of red paint on these, and it says, not these, do not undo these. You can just still see some of that. Now's the time to undo them. So I'll loosen them up and come back. Now, I've undone these nuts here. We just need to finish this final one. Now, the reason earlier I said not to undo these bolts is because when you undo them with the cover up the right way, it's possible for the bolts to slide down a little bit, and they'll turn and turn and turn. You have trouble, or they can come out and drop down into the guts. So that's a square-headed bolt. It actually locks on the cylinder here. So that's why I pointed out earlier not to undo them. But look, let's get into it now. We're good to undo them. Now this is your main lift cylinder. So to get it off, you actually pull it forward, and there it is. Now, this hole here is how the oil gets into the cylinder. So this has a gasket. On the late model tractors, this has it's a machined housing and it has an O-ring, but on the early ones, there's a gasket. Now, to keep this sitting nice and flush with the housing, they've got a gasket at the back there. Now, that gasket is for no other reason than to keep this surface parallel with the machine surface there. So that's easy to sort out. Now, in here we have the piston. I'll let that sit there for a minute. The piston might come down on its own. If not, we'll blow it out. So with that out, we can turn this around, and you can see that this fork here, we actually had to slide it off that fork. And I'll try and zoom you in on that a little bit if I can. So yeah, there's that fork there. It's held true by the holes in the cylinder. So the cylinder has a couple of holes here, and they're just as guides to hold this fork in a good place. Now this main fork that goes down onto your control valve, it's held on to this other fork by two split pins, and two cotter pins I should say, or clevis pins is the right word. I go a bit blank. So we pull the split pins on both sides, and these pins will come out with a little help from my knockometer. They're not tight. With those pins out, this can then be brought out through the top. Now, you'll see that little rub mark there. That's made by this lever here. As it sits on there rubbing back and forth, that's what makes it all work. So we have pins here to look at Make sure they're okay, not worn. We'll put new split pins in here regardless. For the price of a split pin, why not do it properly? And this rub mark here, that's actually from the bottom of the cylinder. So, okay, we'll put that aside. Now this fork here, it's attached to this yoke, so we'll try and not knock everything on the floor. Bring this over and see if we can get this out. Now the adjustment on this, when you do it, is you should be able to undo the rocker link here and turn this to adjust it, but as with many, this won't be able to be adjusted. So this bolt here, that's a little guide and a felt seal. So it looks like on ours, as with many others, I think we'll just come through there and we'll try and cut that off. And once we can cut it off, well, then we can deal with it better. Well, here we are. I'm going to change my name to Rough as Guts Engineering. Rag Engineering, got a nice sound to it, hasn't it? And what I've done, I've come in with the cut-off wheel down onto the bolt, got it most of the way through, then just give it a bump and it came off. So this here, it's something that you probably just have to do. That's a guide, it's a spring guide. I think that should be part of this here, that's broken off over the time. I believe this and that go together, but no longer. That's the felt seal that seals around the rod. Now this rod here, that should turn freely in this thread here. If it doesn't, you'll have to do what we've done here. Cut it right up at the end there. Now the reason we cut right up at the end there, on this one, this was broken, so that gave us a bit of thread to see. You may be able to find just where you've only got to go through this piece at the back, but you may have to go through the whole lot too, so that's just par for the course if you have a hard one. Now to get this piece out here, heat this bit up with the oxy. Yeah, once you get it hot, hold this piece in the vise, heat this up with the oxy, and that'll just turn off, come out. So sometimes easier said than done. Now this is your draft spring, nice big heavy spring. Now when your top link pushes against this spring, it pushes here, pushes on to the yoke here, which in turn pushes on the other side, which works the valve to do your lifting of your hydraulics. So that yoke that we just cut, that's just with a pin onto this yoke here, so that's easily replaceable. Now this here, this is just a guide. We'll get our 11/16 spanner going. There's a tin cover here. This tin cover shields the felt and tries to stop water getting into the housing. Undo these fellas. All this is available new from Sparex, and they've given me the lot to fit to do a nice job on this tractor. So that's a little guide, the first bit. Oh, that's stuck, and that's a tin cover. But we can cover that when we're going back together. Look at the dirt that gets in there over the life of the tractor. Now, this shaft here, your main rock shaft, I can't buy bushers for this at the moment anywhere, which I probably would like to do, but for the age of this machine, I never thought it had done all that much work, but there's no actual movement in here that I can feel, so I'll make up my mind whether we attack that or not. To get the arms off, we just open up these little lock tabs here. This fella here. I just buy these cheap chisels for knocking around and abusing. This should just come undone. These can be very tight. Once again, sometimes you need an oxy. If you don't have to, if they're not leaking and you're happy with them, leave them there. That's just a thick washer that holds the spline. Look, that was an easy kill. I've had them very hard to do. Now, if you look inside there, you can see a master spline. That one, you see all the skinny splines and a big fat one. The big fat one's a master spline. That goes into the shaft here. So with that there, you can't actually fit this in the wrong position. You just can't do it. Now, when you look at the master spline is directly in line with the centre of the arm, and so the left and right hand arms are the same. They're interchangeable. Now, this little pin here, he's very tight. We'll take him over, we'll heat this up with the oxy set. Once you get the heat into them, they don't take much to move out, so we'll do that for sure. We might just undo this one while we're on a bit of a roll. All the carpenters will be crying because I'm using an old chisel, but anyway. I'm more of a wood butcher than a carpenter. As with most jobs, a lot of time's taken up in the cleaning. Cleanliness is everything with mechanical parts. Just a point of interest too is this hole here. That's where the oil comes from your pump through the housing, then it comes out here into your cylinder, into that hole up on your cylinder there. So when you go back together, it's important to keep that clean. And this is a rusty one. But it is moving. That's more how they are. You usually have to work a little bit for them. Now this fella here, the shaft should come out of him. We might free that up a little bit first and put a bit of possum pea around it, but that's free on that shaft. But we just have to try and keep the bushes from coming out, and I can't remember which side that's supposed to come out, so maybe I think it'd be a good idea to put a little bolt in there. And it's got nice brass bushes in there, so that's not too bad. Well, it looks like the bush on this side is starting to move away. So I'll do this bolt up a little bit. And it's mainly so we're hitting on the bolt and not on the end of the shaft that mushrooms the head of the bolt out. Oh, not the bolt, the shaft, I'm sorry. You can see it's on its way with the bits coming out there. So look, I'll get this out off camera and I'll come back when I've got the bare housing. And there you are. There's the shaft out. We have a master spline all the way. Now this bush came out with it. Now this one came out to the right, but it appears it doesn't matter. Whichever side the bush wants to come out, it should be free to come. Now this fella here, your crank, look at the rust in that they get over the years. Now just as yes, you can see that just in here, there's a master spline there, and you can see the matching master spline here. So when that sits on the shaft, you can only go one way. You can't get it where it doesn't want to go. So to line them up, there you go. Can only go on one way. So that's the bare housing. You can see the seat bolts, they're still in there. I'll probably take them out now. We'll clean the whole housing up properly. We'll actually pop the piston out. We haven't done that yet. I'll do that with a bit of compressed air, and you really do have to be careful with that. It'll go bang and scare you. It actually, yeah, you do have to be very careful with that. And look, I probably should have put a bit of air in here and let it pop out on its own with the arms, but yeah, I just didn't do that. So we'll pop this out, and then we might head over and loosen a few things like this up. Okay, this is your main hydraulic cylinder. Now that piston, it's stuck up in there a little bit, but look, I must say you need to be careful doing this. Just start the air out here a little bit. Looks like this one's stuck from sitting, we'll see. We'll get a block of board, a big chunk of wood here. And we'll just give it a thump once we get back in frame. try that. It is coming. It's a little bit further down. I better. It's almost there. There you go. Oh, come on. Now that's your hydraulic piston, and it's got 3 rings in there. And on this we have one gap one side, one gap the other, which is good, and one in between. Now, you'll wonder why sometimes if you leave your TE20 parked with the hydraulics up, it only takes a minute or two for them to come down, to drop. Well, you have oil here in top of the cylinder pushing down here. It's got this little maze to travel out. So by the time the oil finds this little maze and drops out the bottom, and look, once it's in the cylinder, it's only a gap so big. But that is why your hydraulics will leak down. It's built into them. I have a fix for that. We're going to fix that when we do this. This cylinder, we need to have a look down the cylinder, and what you're looking for is scores, and they're just marks from the cast iron piston. And look, it's hard to see in there, but they get scores up and down from the cast iron going in. Now, if they're not too bad, you can get an engine cylinder hone and run the hone up and down. It's like a brake hone but just bigger. That's a 2.5 inch piston, I believe, and you can hone that and get a nice new surface. But in our instance here, we do have some scores on that down there, and rust. There's a bit of rust there, that's why it was hard to come out. So we're going to put a brand new Sparx cylinder in ours. We're going to put a piston in. We can buy a piston now that doesn't have these rings in it. It actually has an O-ring and a backup, like on the Ford tractors, the Ford 8N, 9N. They actually had a better system, to tell you the truth. Very similar, like there was a big court case between Harry Ferguson and young Mr. Ford. And but they actually had an O-ring and a backup washer. Now, an O-ring and a backup washer, an O-ring is softer than a cast iron ring, so the cast iron ring will probably last longer, but the O-ring and the backup washer will give you a better seal. So we're going to put the O-ring and the backup in this when we go back together. Okay, we'll go and try and get a couple of knuckles apart. Now, before we go too far, what we'll do is we'll strip this down and have a look at what we have. Now, to get this apart, you have a screw here. That should have a split pin through it, but it appears it's never been put back on this one. So we'll just see if we can... Oh yes, it still wants to move. These can be hard to get off sometimes. This is alloy, and alloy with the steel shaft, sometimes they grow together a little bit. Oh, just a bit too tight for the fingers. Okay, so you have the nut, the castellated nut, then you have a spring, then a flat washer. We'll try and keep them in order. And this shaft here is keyed on. You can see the key in there. So what that tells us is this shaft probably won't knock down through there so easy. The lever here is held on by 2 bolts. There's no need to undo that on ours at this stage. We have a screw here that's just a ring in. Someone's had it there one time. And we also have the quadrant stop here. Now that quadrant stop, you can set that to a particular height or something like that for your hydraulics. This should have a wing nut on there and a flat washer, so you can adjust it to where you'd like it. I'll just see if this will just bump. Oh, look at that. Boy, we're lucky with this tractor. All the way along it's been very kind to us. Okay, I'll go and get a couple of spanners. I'll undo these two and that'll let the whole lever come out as a whole. I may undo that, but I'm not that keen because I have a steel bolt into an alloy housing here. So that may not go well for us. Alright, I'll get a little bit of gear and we'll come back. Right, I've had a bit of a win. These 2 screws come out. That was a nice easy kill. So I need to get rid of that bit of rubbish screw there that someone's put in. We don't need that. That's part of the adjusting wedge. We'll have to clean that up and find a wing nut for that. Now with these bolts here, look, I've had more arse than Jesse the elephant in coming and getting these apart. But they must have been out at some time in the past because this one didn't have a washer on it and this other one does. So I'll have to have a quick look in the parts book and see which is the right way. And yes, it wants to come. So that's the go. That's got a bit of a twist in the lever. Yeah, you can just see the twist in the end there. If I hold that straight, you can see it up here. I'll have to see if that's supposed to be in there. I'll look at one of my other tractors. Look at this. I've never had one so easy. Let's hope you have an easy one too, eh? See, that won't come because of the key. So a quick way to get the key is a pair of side cutters. Go about halfway down to the key and just grab the edge. That'll get the key out for you. And that shaft can now be withdrawn. We're remarkably lucky with this little tractor. Now on the quadrant lever here, that bit of junk you can see there, that's a cork pad. Now that cork pad, it's a friction surface against the quadrant here, and so the idea of that is you tighten up the screw at the end here until when you put the lever in a certain position, it's tight enough that it can move freely, yet it's still tight enough. Well, it's loose enough that it will move freely, but it's tight enough that it will hold the position that you leave it into. So, okay, time to clean stuff up.